Thursday of Holy Week. This is our episode 4, and we're looking each day during Jesus' last week between Palm Sunday and the cross, and just looking at what was it like for Jesus on this very day. And it's been really fun to be with you each day. And man, this day is so full. Passover is the big moment. The garden is there, but during Passover, we have some of Jesus' most famous teachings. We have about Peter is going to deny Jesus. We have the foot washing. We have the high priestly prayer where Jesus prays for all believers for all time, which means if you're in faith and you are part of the church, not just local church, not just Living Stones, but you're part of the church in faith, Jesus prayed for you. We have the high priestly prayer. He then goes to the garden, as I mentioned, and we're going to be taking our Good Friday service and looking at the garden scene and the prayer in the garden when Jesus cries up. But I want to focus just on a tiny little moment inside the Passover that I think, because we don't have the cultural history and we don't understand what's actually happening in the text. And the Passover meal, the Seder, was a choreographed meal. It took hours. There was several cups of wine. There was rhythms and storytelling, and the kids were involved, and there was hiding of the matzah and the breaking of the matzah, and there was singing, and it was an incredible celebration of God's deliverance of Israel from Egypt. And it was a whole night of celebration, and they took it seriously and they partied hard. And man, to have been a part of it must have been amazing. And I've been a part of some Seders now, but it just doesn't have the same weight and experiences, I'm sure, that they did it. And realize that this is Jesus's 33rd Passover meal. For 30 plus times, he has been at this meal before, all the while being prepared for the cross. And this is his last Passover. We're actually told, Jesus tells us that he will not drink of the fruit of the cup or the fruit of the vine pertaining to Passover until we're all with him again. The next time we have Passover with Jesus, it's the new Passover in light of Jesus being the Passover lamb, and it is going to be an incredible supper. It's called the Supper of the Lamb, and we're going to have Passover again with Jesus and celebrating not just Israel's freedom from Egypt, but our freedom from sin. And that is incredible. Can't wait. But inside this Passover meal, you have this little moment. And like I said, it's a choreographed meal. And there's a part of the Passover called Passing of the Sop. And the sop was a little sandwich made with matzah bread, made with horseradish, and made with haroset. And the matzah represented them having to flee Israel without able to bake bread with leaven in it, with yeast in it. And then the horseradish is a bitter herb. It represents the bitterness of slavery and death in Egypt. And then the last part is the haroset. And the haroset is meant to be the mortar that the Israelites built the pyramids and built Egypt with as slaves. And as part of this Passover meal, you would create what's called the sop, and you would dip it. And you would dip it in the horseradish as the bitter herb, the bitterness of slavery. You would dip it into the haroset to represent the mortar, the work of their slavery. And then you wouldn't eat it. You would then give it to somebody around this Passover table that represented somebody that you loved most or that you loved a lot. It's a really powerful moment of any Seder. And listen to this moment in Passover, and it makes the Bible come alive on this Thursday evening at Passover. John 13, verses 21 through 30. Listen to what it says. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of the disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at the table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned to him and asked Jesus of whom he was speaking. So that disciple, leaning against leaning back against Jesus, said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it." So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him, and Jesus said to him, what you are going to do, do quickly." Now no one at the table knew why he had said this to him. Some thought that because Jesus had the money bag, Jesus was telling him to buy what we need for the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. This moment on Thursday in the upper room with Passover is the moment of the sop. It's when Jesus dipped his matzah in the bitter herb to represent the slavery of Israel, but more, right? And then he dipped it in the haroset to represent the mortar of their slavery and their work, the emptiness of working inside the law. And he gave it to Judas. Think about that. It says that the one that Jesus loved was sitting right there, but did he give it to John? No. He gave it to Judas. How incredible. He gave the sop to the one he loved most. And what's powerful about that is we know Judas was just conspiring in back rooms against Jesus the day before. And Jesus knows that. In fact, he says to Judas, "Go and do what you planned." What love and grace Jesus had for Judas. Even after Judas had already decided to conspire against him, Jesus reaches out and says, "I love you. I'm for you." There's grace. It says that Judas was then filled again by the spirit of Satan, and he left. He ate the morsel. He accepted it, but he did not receive it. He ate this act of love, but he did not receive it. He let Satan and Satan's bitterness fill him. What if Judas could have been filled by the love and grace of Jesus? How his life and his decisions would have been so different. Jesus went to the cross. These are the last hours of his freedom. He goes to the cross, but now not to celebrate Passover, but as the actual Passover lamb. And he breaks his body, and he dips his body in his own blood, drenched in his own blood, and he hands it out to you and me, the Judas of the story, of the relationship between us and Christ. And he says, "Here's the sop, and I'm giving it to you, the one I love most." Can you receive that? I want to receive that and let it drive out every ounce of bitterness and anger and complaining and thanklessness and self-exaltation and self-righteousness. I want to just be filled with the love of Jesus. He loves us. Happy Thursday. Adonai,